Welcome to the Undragoned podcast, focusing on fortifying the people of God and slaying dragons.
So episode 14, I believe, of Undragoned. For this one, I have Christine Cohen. She is the author of The Winter King and another novel that's set to come out in the next few months. She's agreed to come on. I read her book just about a month or so ago and thought it was fantastic. And I thought it'd just be super beneficial to have her on. So Christine, thanks for being on the pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about The Winter King and the protagonist, Cora, and just to give us the quick synopsis of it.
The elevator pitch.
Yeah.
So The Winter King it's a story about a remote village in a medieval Nordic inspired world, and it's ruled by a god called the Winter King. And every year after the harvest, he takes human form and curses the village with 4 months of winter. So the town is ruled by a high priest who is the intercessor between the Winter King and his people. And our main character is a young girl named Cora. Her father died several years before the start of the book, and she and her mother and younger siblings live on the outskirts of the village. They're kind of outcasts from society. And so the story begins after their savings are wiped out in this catastrophic turn of events. Cora takes on extra work at the house of the high priest, working as a maid. And it's there that she starts to uncover secrets about the village that could change her and her family's fortunes if she can survive long enough to tell them. So if you've read Till We Have Faces, I was modeling a lot of Cora's personality and who she is off of Lewis's main character, Orwell, which is to say, she's not particularly likable at the beginning. And that I know has thrown some people. She struggles with self-pity, self-deception, justifying her choices because of the hardships around her. But she's also I think, a very sympathetic character. She loves her family, her mother. She works hard for them. She's always putting her family first and their safety first. But at some points, she makes that too high of a priority, if that makes sense. I tried to make I intentionally made her bitterness understandable because I think we can all relate to being tempted in that way. I know I have. It's very common temptation when you deal with any sort of hardship to use that pain as a weapon and to use your sorrow as an excuse to act out however you want. And so this was something that Cora experiences, but this is not too spoilery. I wanted to make sure not to leave her in that pain. She has to recognize it and repent of it in order to heal. So
yeah, and one of the things that kind of gripped me and pulled me into the story was Cora and how, like, as you mentioned, she isn't perfect. There's this gritty kind of real side to her. And so sometimes, with authors, they romanticize their protagonist to a fault. And then the surrounding cast, they're kind of the imperfect ones. But with Cora, it's like you can really kind of sympathize and identify with her pain to a level, which I thought was like a major strength to it, and just really pulled me in and loved reading it. And I'm a 28-year-old man, right? But I still could identify with Cora to a certain level, which I thought was really, really cool. And this is a young adult novel.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wrote it for that. I was trying to find that sweet spot of in the publishing world, the way it's set up right now, there's books middle grade, which is 8 to 12-year-olds. And then there's young adult, which is technically 13 to 18-year-olds. But it inevitably skews older. Most young adults is written for 17 to, I'd say, 25-year-olds. It's read by them, purchased by them, written by them a lot. And so I wanted to find and write books for that market of teens who are done with middle grade, but either don't want to or just are not ready to move on to the stuff that's in young adult.
So. For sure. And obviously, like, our characters, they really resonate with us. Like, for the listeners listening on, just think about your favorite books, novels, stories that you've read, the characters that really had an impact on you. And the Cora is definitely one of those characters that could be that as well. But when you're going about your story writing, your storytelling, what kind of traits are you trying to instill with your characters, particularly your female protagonists? Because I know obviously there's Cora. Is your new novel, is it a female protagonist as well?
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
it is? Okay. So what kind of traits, values are you trying to instill with those characters for your readership to really kind of, I guess, be impacted by or resonate with?
Yeah. So the first and foremost for me is believability. And I mean, this is not obviously exclusive to female protagonists, but I want all of my characters to feel real because I'm a Christian. I want to tell the truth about the world. So none of my characters get to be morality props, right? Like you were saying, even just having a protagonist who's just there to make a point, or any character who's there to be like a talking head. They have to be fully fleshed out. And I haven't really, I haven't dived deep into this. So this is me spitballing here, but it's somewhat universally accepted that girls will read books with male protagonists, right? And I know I did growing up, but boys will not as often read books with female protagonists. Those are like the girly books. You hear that a lot. And I do wonder if some of that comes from poorly done fiction that uses girls more as props than as actual giving them full personalities. So, you get your morally righteous ones, or like the books that are written specifically for girls. Like I don't know, I'm thinking back to my childhood, but it was like the Babysitter's Club, where girls are relegated to a very distinct, this is what you do box, and actually, this is an anecdote. I was doing a book signing in a different city once, and a man came up to me to buy my book, and he told me that he himself was also writing a book with a female protagonist, and she needed a hobby, and he couldn't think of one to give her to make her like a fully fleshed out character. And then he goes, but then it hit me. I realized her hobby could be shopping. I was like, oh no, oh dear. Anyway, but I've had, like you said, and thank you very much. I'm glad you love The Winter King. I've had a lot of boys and men tell me that they loved it. And I think part of that is simply because Cora is a human with a fully believable personality. We can all relate to those sorts of struggles and triumphs of the opposite gender, as long as they're actually believable. So, and of course there are exceptions. I don't want to like blanket dismiss all of female protagonists. There's some really wonderful ones out there, but yeah. So just first and foremost, that to me is most important, that she can struggle with the same issues that a boy would, but obviously struggle with them in a feminine way. So that's one side. When I'm thinking though about girls who are reading my books, or boys, when I'm thinking about what I want them to come away with, like what are the traits that I'm hoping to equip them with, right? Because that's what literature does. It feeds us. The biggest one, I think, is to be fearless, because I think the women in scripture, what they're like, when I think about them across the board, they are so brave. They're put in so many compromising and difficult positions, and they cannot give into fear, right? If you just go through Esther, Abigail, Ruth, Mary, the list just goes on. And I think of First Peter. This was actually where it first hit me. This was maybe a couple of years ago when I was reading First Peter, and where he talks about how you are, you're Sarai's daughters as long as you do well and are not afraid. And I was thinking about that, like that's such an interesting thing to say, you as long as you're not afraid, you cannot be afraid. And then the Proverbs 31 woman, she does not fear for the future. So my characters, I like to put them in genuinely terrifying situations, both in The Winter King and in my upcoming book. And I want them to perhaps not to be unafraid, but to do the right thing despite being afraid. So.
That's one of the things that left off the page to me. That underneath the surface of Cora, of some of the other female characters, was this strong view of biblical femininity. So like, I don't know if this was a character that directly inspired Cora, but like I got strong like hints of Naomi from the story of Ruth at the
Mm.
first part, and maybe with the mother character as well, of just how she's kind of embittered right now, kind of angry. And obviously Naomi was that after her husband passed, but you see those strong aspects of those biblical characters that really like our young girls, young boys need to really recapture and look to, because as you mentioned, some YA novels, you treat girls as props or as talking heads, as you mentioned, and it just does a disservice to them, because like some of the strongest female characters in our history as humans, we can look to God's word and find them there and learn
Right.
from.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, there's so many, the temptation right now is not to have self-right or overly pietistic women, female protagonists, right? It's kind of the opposite. It's like you have these gals who, the way that they show that they're strong is to like give up their femininity, right? So they're showing that they're being powerful by being super masculine. Thinking of just, well, any any of the main characters from like Hunger Games or the Marvel series, you know, it's like there's basically claiming, these books and movies are making the truth claim that there's no inherent difference in the strength of a man versus a woman, or the role of a man versus a woman. And that's just simply not true. Like if you've kept up with any of the transgender discussions right now, like we know what happens when you put a man who was born a man into a boxing ring with a woman. Like it doesn't matter what we say about the strengths, like the glory of a young man is his strength. That's what it says in the Bible. It does not say that the glory of a young woman is her strength, but women do have a glory. It's just a different one. And I think that with the biblical women, so much of what's amazing to me about what they do is how shrewd they are, using the situation that they are in. Like they're so smart at not trying to like remove themselves from their hardships or removing themselves from the difficulties, but like really leaning into it in a way. So I think of, like you were saying with Naomi and Ruth, you know, laying down at some strange man's feet out of obedience, like that is amazing, and a very feminine, shrewd way to protect herself, you know. With Esther, the same thing, becoming a concubine because of Mordecai and listening to what he says, or Mary risking her reputation and her life. Jael, you know, being the ultimate hostess. Like there are so many situations where you have women using the skills God's given them to be powerful in their own way, operating within very distinctly feminine spheres. So, yeah.
And obviously, as you mentioned, it's I mean, I love all that. Your approach to crafting a female protagonist is way different from some of the most popular YA novelists that are going right now, right? So we have Katniss from Hunger Games. We have Bella from Twilight. I didn't even know the girl from the Divergent series. Do you know?
Nope.
I have no idea.
I still remember it.
Would Handmaid's Tale be considered young adult, or?
That would. I don't know if it's young adult or adult. Yeah,
Gotcha.
That's actually one I have not read. I have very little interest in reading it, but
yeah,
maybe I'll get around to it. Sure. Yeah.
But why do you think? I mean, this might be, actually, it is a much longer conversation than what we have time for, but maybe we can kind of touch on it for right now. Why do you think authors like that are going for such a different idea of femininity than from, like, say your approach, the biblical approach?
Mm-hmm. A couple of reasons. I think one is because of the real push in feminism for equalizing, right? Like we were talking about, this idea that men and women are equal, therefore they must be the same. So it's like a lack of being able to think of logically, like if we've given the ground, if we've conceded that there is no real difference between a man and a woman, then women should be able to be whatever, like the top warlord in some clan, as I see a lot in fantasy novels. And then part of it too, I feel like, is a bizarre knee-jerk reaction to, so like in fantasy in particular, I think in high fantasy, this was kind of a problem where there were men who were I guess bloodthirsty or power hungry or unapologetically ruthless. Like there was sort of that alpha male type in fantasy with no consequences. So that was an actual issue, or they were kind of misogynistic or whatever. And so it seemed like, though, when editors and authors pinpointed that issue, they were like, okay, so that was how the men were, and they shouldn't be that way anymore. And so the solution is to give the girls a turn. Like it was like, we just thought that's how we'll fix the problem, is by, I don't know, letting the girls be the like unapologetic, ruthless main characters, you know, instead of being like, hey, that's actually bad for everyone. No one should be like that. So I think that might be some of it. You know, you see the same thing in rap music, where we had men just objectifying women's bodies since the 80s, and then suddenly we were like, oh, hey, let's not do that anymore. Instead, let's let the women do it like to themselves. So that type of thing is, I'm sure that there's other ways that we do that, but yeah, those would be big ones.
For sure. I mean, it's from what you're talking about. I mean, we got it wrong the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So the response then is just to double down on it, but then just switch it to the opposite sex.
Right.
Yeah, we need a little more reflection there, for sure.
Yeah. And I just think, I really do think that there's just this inability by many people to understand what the strength of a woman could be. So, and this is something that I do try also to bring out in my stories, and that I've benefited a lot from as a, you know, I'm a mother of three. I went through the trenches of, you know, being the stay-at-home mom with 3 small children. And that is objectively really hard. Like you have to be strong in order to get through that. And I feel like I want to be hard on my sex, my gender, because in a good way, because we're currently a bit of an embarrassment on social media. We women and girls are given this free pass on our emotions and our reactions. So I have noticed that we live in a society that tries to give us a break on pretty much everything. So, you know, you have, I'm sure, seen those t-shirts like "feed me tacos and tell me I'm pretty," or "it's wine o'clock," or "mommy needs her me time," you know, "mama, it's okay if you yell at your babies because you need a break." Like it is, our social media is just saturated with those types of lies to women, basically saying like, you're not strong enough to get through the hardship of, you know, the little years. And actually, this is another tangent. I saw a while back, my favorite one was a meme that somebody had posted on the internet that said, "No one has it harder than the modern woman." And I was like, really? Have you read any missionary biography? You know, picked up a textbook? Like our society is not doing our women any favors by telling us that we're not, you know, able to do these difficult tasks. And so for me, I really want to focus and emphasize that women can be strong. We can rise to the challenges, and we can do it in a way that isn't abdicating our roles. We don't get to be hot messes emotionally any more than men do. So,
and coming back to Winter King, I mean, that's one of the things I think that was so effective with your creation of Cora, is that she is so imperfect and she struggles. Like with each chapter, she's encountering something challenging, which makes her stronger for it, right? And she overcomes that, which I think is better than just a handout card for everything. Actually encountering adversity and working through it. That's way more respectful for sure.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe like a parting thought then. So for young girls, young women listening in here, what do you want to communicate to them through your stories?
Yeah. Well, when I was thinking about preparing for this podcast, I was thinking of that quote from, I'm blanking on his name. He's a poet, but it's the one, the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. And that is obviously, it's hyperbole. Like, I haven't actually read the whole poem. It could be rubbish. But there is a sense in which there's something to be said for the force of truly powerful femininity in the world and what it can accomplish. And, we don't, as women, we should not be doing ourselves this disservice of pretending that there isn't true feminine strength and honor, right? Like, it looks different, but it's not that it's not there. It's not that we don't get those things. It's that submission is a strength that takes a lot of strength. Obedience to God is a strength. Dying to ourselves is a strength. To bring up children, to submit to our fathers or our husbands, to walk with the Lord, to say no to these cultural norms that are killing our women. Self-pity and envy and grasping at what those men have or whatever, trying to be equal in that way is just a terrible trap. It's a huge waste of time. And I think once we're set free from that, we can actually get to work doing what God intends for us. And we really can be such a powerful force in the world. And so hopefully, I want to write women who, young adults, young women who are inspiring to have these attributes, even in a fantasy setting, but that you can take that and apply it to your own life. How can I be brave? How can I go through a hardship well? How can I not give into bitterness or fear or whatever? And how can I learn from these fictional characters?
Man, yeah, super powerful stuff there. All right, well, we have you for another couple minutes. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your new book that you have coming out in November, right?
November, yes, should be right around Thanksgiving.
And you've given me the scoop. You said that you have the title and you're going to air it
here. You're hearing it first here, folks. This is big. I know. I just this morning got the email from my editor with this is the final title. So it is called The Sinking City. And it is I would call it an alternate historical fantasy. So The Winter King was pretty much just straight fantasy. I modeled it off of sort of a Nordic Viking-esque culture, but it does not actually take place in any place you could pinpoint on a map. But this one takes place in 17th century Venice, with the addition of magic and monsters. So there are underwater creatures that are a threat to the city. Venice at that time was set up in guild systems. So there was the lace making guild and rope makers and woodworking, and there's also the magician's guild. So The Sinking City is about a girl who, for various reasons, runs away from her home, disguises herself as a boy, and becomes the assistant to the most notorious magician in Venice. So coming out Thanksgiving.
Wow, that sounds very intriguing. I'll definitely have to grab a copy off the shelf. And for those listening in, grab a copy of The Winter King, either on canonpress.com or .org, one of the two, or Amazon. And make sure to grab The Sinking City. You heard it here first, folks. Make sure to grab it come November time when it's out, and I'll make sure to post it on my social when her book's out as well. So just so you know. But Christine, thank you so much for being on the pod.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed the conversation.
Fun.